The year is 1848. The place is Cavendish, Vermont. A young man named Phineas Gage, just 25 years old, is the foreman of a crew blasting rock to lay a new railroad line. He's known for being efficient, well-balanced, and a sharp businessman. His employers describe him as their most capable man. But on September 13th, a single moment of distraction would change everything, not just for Gage, but for our entire understanding of the human brain. The process was routine. Bore a hole in the rock, add blasting powder, a fuse, and then sand. Then, use a tamping iron, a specialized iron rod, to pack the sand down tightly. This would contain the explosion, directing its force into the rock. But on this fateful afternoon, Gage got distracted. He turned to speak to his men, and as he did, he brought his tamping iron down into the hole. The problem? The sand hadn't been poured in yet. The iron rod struck the rock, creating a spark. That spark ignited the powder. The explosion that followed wasn't directed into the rock. It was directed straight up, turning Gage's tamping iron into a missile. This wasn't just any iron rod. It was 3 feet 7 inches long, over an inch in diameter, and weighed 13¼ pounds. It entered Gage's left cheek, tore through the base of his skull, passed behind his left eye, and exited clean through the top of his head, landing some 80 feet away, reportedly covered in blood and brain matter. The force of the blast threw Gage onto his back. His men rushed over, horrified, certain they were looking at a dead man. But then, the impossible happened. Within minutes, Phineas Gage was not only conscious, he was sitting up and talking. He was loaded into an ox cart for the 3/4-mile ride back to his hotel in town. Astonishingly, he walked, with a little help, up the flight of stairs to his room. Dr. John Harlow, a young local physician, was called to the scene. What he found was something no medical textbook could have prepared him for. A man with a massive hole through his head, yet he was still able to recount the accident with perfect clarity. Dr. Harlow could literally see Gage's brain pulsating beneath the wound at the top of his skull. The initial injury was horrific, but the real fight for Gage's life was just beginning. In the days that followed, Gage developed a severe infection. His wound became abscessed, and he slipped into a semi-comatose state. His family even prepared his coffin, so certain were they of his impending death. But Dr. Harlow was relentless. He cleaned the wound constantly, draining the pus and removing fragments of bone. Against all odds, Gage began to rally. By mid-October, he was taking his first steps. By November, he was well enough to go back to his family home in New Hampshire to continue his recovery. Physically, he was healing. He lost vision in his left eye, but otherwise, he seemed to be making a miraculous comeback. But the man who returned was not the same man who had left. The Phineas Gage everyone knew was gone forever. Before the accident, Gage was universally liked. He was responsible, pious, and respected. After the accident, his personality underwent a profound and disturbing transformation. His friends and family put it bluntly, Gage was no longer Gage. The well-mannered, reliable foreman had been replaced by a man who was irreverent, profane, and grossly impatient. He couldn't stick to any plan or decision. He was fitful, capricious, and showed little deference to his fellows. His employers, who had once valued him so highly, had to let him go. They said the balance between his intellectual faculties and animal propensities had been destroyed. He could no longer be a foreman because he couldn't manage himself, let alone a team of men. This new Gage was a puzzle. Physically, he was capable. He could work, he could travel. But his social judgment was gone. He drifted from job to job, unable to hold on to any position for long. For a time, he even exhibited himself and his famous tamping iron at Barnum's American Museum in New York. He became a curiosity, a sideshow act. He was a living, breathing medical marvel, but his life had unraveled. His story became a cautionary tale whispered among those who knew him. He was a man who had survived the unsurvivable, only to lose himself in the process. So what had actually happened inside his skull? Why did an injury that left his memory and reason intact so completely alter his character? At the time, science had no clear answer. The prevailing idea was that the brain worked as a whole, that specific functions weren't tied to specific areas. Phineas Gage's case was the first, and most dramatic, piece of evidence to challenge that. Dr. Harlow meticulously documented the changes in Gage's personality. He understood that the tamping iron had selectively destroyed a part of Gage's brain, and this physical damage had resulted in a specific psychological change. The part of the brain that was obliterated was the left frontal lobe. Decades later, neurologists studying Gage's skull and the accounts of his behavior began to connect the dots. They realized that the frontal lobes, specifically the prefrontal cortex, are not just lumps of tissue. They are the seat of our personality, our ability to make decisions, to plan for the future, and, most importantly, to navigate complex social situations. The prefrontal cortex is what allows us to inhibit inappropriate impulses, to understand social cues, and to behave in ways that are considered socially acceptable. Gage's injury had essentially scooped out his social compass. His intellect was fine, but his ability to apply it to everyday life was gone. He became the textbook case for what happens when the frontal lobes are damaged. His tragedy became neuroscience's triumph. It was the first solid proof that different parts of the brain do different things, and that our very essence, our personality, is rooted in the physical matter inside our heads. After his time as a curiosity, Gage's life took another unexpected turn. In 1852, he moved to Chile to work as a long-distance stagecoach driver. For nearly 7 years, he managed a route that required immense structure and routine, caring for horses and dealing with passengers. Some modern researchers believe this structured life might have helped him regain some semblance of his old self. It provided an external framework for the internal one he had lost. It's a fascinating and somewhat redemptive chapter in his story, suggesting a level of recovery that was previously dismissed. However, his health eventually began to fail. In 1860, after suffering a series of epileptic seizures, he returned to his family in San Francisco. The seizures grew more frequent and severe. On May 21, 1860, nearly 12 years after the accident that made him famous, Phineas Gage died. He was 36 years old. Years later, Dr. Harlow, who had followed Gage's story from afar, persuaded his family to have the body exhumed. Gage's skull, along with the tamping iron that had been his constant companion and was reportedly buried with him, was sent back to Harlow. He donated them to the Harvard Medical School's Warren Anatomical Museum, where they remain on display to this day. They are among the museum's most treasured artifacts, a silent, powerful testament to one of the most important and strangest cases in the history of medicine. Phineas Gage's improbable survival and tragic transformation forced the world to see the brain not as a mysterious, indivisible soul, but as a complex machine, a biological engine of personality. And it all started with one spark, one blast, and one iron rod on a Vermont railway. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the incredible history of science and medicine. We'll see you in the next one.